From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 530 News.
I'm Mike Dennison in Helena. Coming up, a reinstated rule helps Montana pharmacies fill the need for vaccines.
Plus, guilty. That was the late-night verdict delivered in a long-awaited trial of a Montana man accused of aiding in the shooting and killing of a Montana deputy. We go inside the courtroom one last time. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us on your Wednesday night. I'm Jeanelle Slade. We'll have those stories in just a moment. But first, as our leaves turn and our nights cool, summer is officially in the record books. Well, tonight we take a look at how summer tourism impacted Billings. It was a barn burner year for Billings, but hotels on the eastern side of the state fared about on par with pre-pandemic numbers. Q2's Mitch Laggy brings us the story.
It's no secret that many people were cooped up in their homes for a majority of 2020. So in 2021, over the course of the summer tourism season, people were out and about, with two Billings hoteliers telling me on Wednesday that they've seen high numbers over the course of the summer. The summer travel season is now officially over, and when it comes to tourism, business was booming in Billings in 2021. Yellowstone National Park is a big draw, with people often starting their trips here, like this couple who traveled to Billings by both car and plane from Sao Paulo, Brazil.
We've been working our way up, little trips here and there, driving only, and then a 3-hour plane ride, but coming from Brazil was a bit of a challenge. Yellowstone, for me, is one of the best. I remember it from when I was a young kid coming here, and I wanted my wife to see it.
The increased number of travelers coming to Billings is evidenced by the state's lodging tax revenue. Comparing the summer months of this year to the dramatically different year of 2020, Yellowstone County saw a 154% increase in lodging tax revenue. At $1.1 million in 2021, Yellowstone County more than doubled the 2020 revenues.
We've seen our occupancy skyrocketing this last summer compared to the last, even the 2019, 2018 years.
Ron Spence is general manager of the 231-room Billings Hotel and Convention Center. Spence says it now costs a lot more to stay in a Billings hotel, up to 30 to 40% from pre-pandemic.
A lot of it attributes to what's going on throughout the whole state, throughout the whole region. You can go to Bozeman and on a given night in Bozeman and pay $500 a night for an average hotel room. Here in Billings, where the rates were running $70 and $80, $90, now you're seeing those rates at $120, $130, $140.
Spence estimated the hotel had about 60% of its customers come from outside of the state this summer, and the convention side of the business is starting to spool back up as well. Staff at Best Western Plus Clock Tower Inn in downtown have had their fair share of tourists this season. At 125 rooms, the hotel caters to small groups and families. Owner Steve Woolrick said room rates rebounded from the recession brought about by the pandemic much faster than expected.
And that includes me, that includes the people at Marriott, Hilton, the big boys. All of us missed that rates would come back. We typically, in a recession, hoteliers will drop rates, and they take 4 to 5 years to get back to normal.
But Woolrick says we still have a ways to go. Yes, tourism in Billings is rebounding, but the Magic City and eastern Montana still lag behind the rest of the state.
When you look at the year-to-date numbers and you compare that back to 2014, 2015 for Billings, southeast Montana, Glendive, basically the eastern part of the state, we're exactly flat with those revenues. So rates have gone up, more hotels have come into the marketplace, not only in Billings, but throughout the eastern Montana. So in reality, why it's nice to see the increase, trust me, we are all happy. However, the fact is that we're still flat with 14 and 15, meaning we have less people coming to the eastern part of the state.
In Billings, Mitch Laggy, MTN News.
Well, although Ed McIntosh thinks fall starts on September 1st, today is the official day. A pretty dry month so far, Ed.
That's right. Really dry as we take a look at where we are, at least with 9 days left to report. It's the third wettest August on record, so we actually picked up quite a bit of moisture as we ended summertime. But once we got into September, everything dried up. Notice we've only had 400ths of an inch recorded at Billings Logan Field. That makes it the second driest September that we've had on record. That goes back to 1934. Just in case you're curious, the wettest hottest year, almost 5 inches of rain back in 1941. Not a whole lot of hope for us to get showers into the forecast before the end of the month, but we'll take a look at that in the complete 7-day forecast in just a few minutes from now. Hope you'll stick around for the complete details.
After 4 years of investigation work, the verdict has been given in the trial of Lloyd Barris.
On the charge of count 1, deliberate homicide by accountability, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. On the charge of count 2, attempted deliberate homicide by accountability, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty. On charge count 3, attempted deliberate homicide by accountability, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty.
After 2.5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lloyd Barris guilty. The jury spent 11 hours in the courtroom listening to the state and defense's closing argument and the state's rebuttal before the jury left to deliberate. Prosecutors called out the defense's argument that Barris had not known about the pursuit as nonsense.
Lloyd Barris, sitting up here in the driver's seat, could not possibly have known what he was doing, which in and of itself doesn't make any sense.
Barris was found guilty of deliberate homicide by accountability in the death of Mason Moore by aiding his son in the May 16, 2017 shooting of the deputy.
This case is an evil partnership between Lloyd Barris and his son Marshall Barris to satisfy their desire, to satisfy their hatred of the government and law enforcement.
After a wild pursuit across the state that ended in a gun battle with law enforcement in Missoula County, Barris surrendered to police and Marshall was shot and later died in the shootout. The defense continued to interrupt the rebuttal repeatedly, calling the evidence to convict Barris as vague, just as they did during their closing argument.
It's their job to tell you the truth, and I'm just pointing out where they didn't.
Barris faces 3 possible life sentences, which will be discussed at a later date. In Butte, Caitlin Aguiles, MTN News.
Labor organizations, disability rights advocates, and 10 voters from across Montana are now challenging a new state law that ends Election Day voter registration. Now, the law argues that the elimination of same-day voter registration creates a burden for working people and those with disabilities. During the 2021 legislative session, Republican lawmakers approved and the governor signed House Bill 176. It closes voter registration at noon the day before an election. Now, supporters of the law say the change will reduce burdens on county elections offices and people will still have plenty of opportunities to vote. The state reports more than 1,300 new COVID-19 cases today, pushing the active case count well over 10,000. Yellowstone County saw the most new cases with 225 and now has more than 2,300 active cases. That's 1,100 more than any other Montana county. Now, the state also reports 13 new deaths in the last 24 hours, and nearly 400 patients are hospitalized with the virus tonight.
Montana pharmacies came out in force Wednesday to speak in favor of an emergency rule they say is vital to help them respond to an increased demand for vaccines and COVID-19 testing. They appeared at a meeting of an interim legislative committee, and we were there too. Just last week, the State Board of Pharmacy issued the rule, which allows pharmacists to supervise more pharmacy technicians or also healthcare professionals like nurses. And as COVID-19 cases and the demand for vaccines and testing increase, pharmacies say they're becoming a go-to source to fill this need.
Pharmacists predict many of the larger sites used for first and second dose COVID shots may not be doing booster shots. They have either shut down or reduced staffing to a very small scale. This will lead to larger workload and burden on those local pharmacies in your local communities and their staffs.
Christy Munson, a pharmacist in Billings, told the Interim Committee on Economic Affairs that the rule will allow pharmacies to continue to help operate large-scale vaccine clinics. And Kimberly Waltz, representing Walgreens, said the initial rule in March enabled the chain to ramp up staffing to meet demand. But that demand is happening again.
However, there is work to be done. It is imperative that we have the staffing flexibility needed to to meet what will be an increased demand for COVID-19 vaccines on top of testing and flu vaccines.
Governor Greg Gianforte issued a similar rule in March, but it ended when he revoked his state of emergency order for COVID-19 in June. The governor's office says it supported the move by the Board of Pharmacy to issue a new emergency rule last Tuesday. The Legislative Committee Wednesday took no action on the new rule, which means it will stand for the next 120 days. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Still ahead on tonight's MTN 5:30 News on Q2, we'll share the success from our Out of the Darkness walk as Q2 viewers stepped up in a big way to help fight suicide. Keep it here.